Before the checkpoints, before the walls, before the headlines, there was a land called Palestine, a mosaic of cultures, languages, and faiths, Arab Muslims, Christians, and small Jewish communities, living across hills of olives and ancient stone towns. For centuries, it was a bridge between continents, a land where merchants passed and prophets walked. But in the past 100 years, this same land has witnessed displacement, resistance, and unending struggle. Today, we uncover the untold history, the Palestinian perspective, on how this conflict truly began, evolved, and continues to shape millions of lives. From the Ottoman era to the British Mandate, through wars, uprisings, and fragile peace talks. This is the story of a people who have endured loss and yet never lost identity. 1. Life in Palestine before the conflict. In the late 1800s, Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire, a multi-ethnic state that ruled much of the Middle East. Most Palestinians lived in small villages. Families farmed wheat, olives, figs, and citrus. Jerusalem, Jaffa, Nablus, Hebron, and Gaza were thriving cities, home to Muslims, Christians, and Jews who traded in markets and lived in shared neighborhoods. There were tensions occasionally, as in any society, but the concept of national conflict did not exist. Palestinian referred to anyone from that region, regardless of religion. Life revolved around family, faith, and the land. That would change as the 20th century began, when Europe's ambitions reached deep into the Middle East. 2. The British Mandate and the Balfour Declaration. During World War I, Britain captured Palestine from the Ottomans. In 1917, Britain issued the Balfour Declaration, promising to support the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. For Palestinians, who made up over 90% of the population, this declaration was shocking. They were not consulted. Their future was discussed in European offices, far from their villages. Between 1920 and 1947, Jewish immigration to Palestine grew under British rule. Some came fleeing persecution in Europe, especially after Hitler's rise. Palestinian Arabs, meanwhile, feared that their land and rights were slowly being taken. Tensions rose as land was bought by Zionist organizations, and British policies favored Jewish institutions. By the mid-1930s, Palestinians launched a revolt demanding independence and the end of mass immigration. Britain responded with military force. Thousands of Palestinians were killed or imprisoned, their political leadership shattered. When Britain finally decided to leave, the stage was set for war. 3. 1947 to 1949. Partition and the Nakba. In 1947, the United Nations proposed to divide Palestine into two states, one Jewish, one Arab. For the Palestinian population, this felt deeply unfair. Jews were about 1/3 of the population, but were allocated over half the land, including fertile coastal areas. Jewish leaders accepted the plan. Palestinian and Arab leaders rejected it, calling it a violation of self-determination. When Britain withdrew in 1948, war broke out between local Arab forces and Zionist militias. By May 1948, Israel declared independence. What followed was a catastrophe Palestinians call al-Nakba, the catastrophe. Over 700,000 Palestinians were expelled or fled from their homes. Entire villages were emptied. Cities like Jaffa and Haifa saw most of their Arab residents forced out. Refugees spread across Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Gaza, many never to return. More than 400 Palestinian villages were destroyed or repopulated. To the new state of Israel, this was victory and survival. To Palestinians, it was the beginning of permanent exile. Families still keep old house keys, symbols of the homes they lost. 4. Between borders, 1949 to 1967. After the war, the map of Palestine was redrawn. Israel controlled about 78% of historic Palestine. The remaining land was divided. The West Bank came under Jordanian control. Gaza Strip was administered by Egypt. For Palestinians, their homeland was now split and occupied by new rulers. Many lived in refugee camps, dependent on UN aid. Dreams of return persisted, but daily survival was the focus. During this time, Palestinian nationalism grew quietly in exile. Organizations like the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, emerged in the 1960s, aiming to reclaim the homeland. But soon another war would reshape everything again. 5. 1967, the Six-Day War and Occupation. In June 1967, Israel fought neighboring Arab states in the Six-Day War. In less than a week, Israel captured the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights, and Sinai Peninsula. For Palestinians, this meant a new chapter. The military occupation began. Overnight, hundreds of thousands were displaced again. Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza now lived under Israeli military rule. Checkpoints, curfews, and land confiscations became part of everyday life. East Jerusalem, with its holy sites, was annexed by Israel, a move not recognized internationally. Israel began establishing settlements on occupied land, communities built for Israeli citizens. These settlements continue to expand, fragmenting Palestinian towns and farmlands. 6. Resistance and the First Intifada. By the 1980s, frustration and hopelessness grew. In 1987, a spontaneous uprising began in Gaza and spread across the West Bank. It was called the First Intifada, meaning shaking off. It was not led by armies, but by ordinary people, students, workers, families. They boycotted Israeli goods, refused to pay taxes, and organized protests with stones and slogans. The response was harsh. Thousands were arrested and many were killed. But the Intifada forced the world to pay attention. It showed that Palestinians were not just refugees or statistics, but a people demanding freedom and dignity. 7. Oslo and the hope that faded. The Oslo Accords of the early 1990s promised peace. Palestinians, led by Yasser Arafat and the PLO, recognized Israel. In return, they expected a path to independence and an end to occupation. The Palestinian Authority was created to govern limited areas of the West Bank and Gaza. There was hope. Flags were raised, schools reopened, and talk of a state filled the air. But settlements kept expanding. Borders remained under Israeli control. Movement between Palestinian areas required Israeli permission. By the 2000s, frustration exploded again into the Second Intifada, and violence returned, this time with heavier losses on both sides. The dream of two states began to fade. 8. Gaza and the modern reality. In 2005, Israel withdrew its troops and settlers from Gaza, but soon after imposed a strict blockade controlling borders, airspace, and sea. Today, Gaza's 2 million residents live in extreme conditions. Restricted movement, limited electricity, and frequent conflict. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, settlements continue to grow. Checkpoints divide cities, and Palestinian land is often seized for expansion or security zones. Despite this, Palestinian culture, poetry, art, and music continues to thrive. Children go to school in refugee camps, farmers still harvest olives under military watch, and families keep alive the memory of villages erased from maps. Through hardship, their identity endures. 9. Reflection, a century of struggle. From the Ottoman hills to refugee camps, from peaceful villages to occupied cities, the story of Palestine is one of displacement and resilience. For Palestinians, history is not distant. It's lived daily. Every wall, checkpoint, and demolished home tells a chapter of a century-long story. The world often debates politics, but at its heart, this conflict is about people. Families seeking dignity, safety, and the right to call a place home. If this story moved you, share this video to keep history alive. Hit like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell to support educational storytelling that gives voice to those often unheard. The history of Palestine and Israel remains complex, painful, and unfinished. But understanding it, truthfully and completely, is the first step toward any real peace. Because behind every statistic, there is a name, behind every headline, a family, and behind every wall, a story waiting to be told.